My name is Stefan Mumaw. I am the Director of Narrative Strategy at First Person. I am your warm-up act for today, for this concert. We've got U2 and the Rolling Stones still coming today. So I get to play a couple of songs for you and then get off stage and get the real heroes in. How many of you would, if I asked you a question, how many of you would self-qualify as creative? How many of you would say, I am creative? All right, it's about half the room. It's a little better than the normal response. Usually in a room this size, you'll get something around 30%. As a matter of fact, Adobe did a study back in 2014, asked the exact same question worldwide, and about 30% said they were creative. For those of you who didn't raise your hand, why? Why didn't you raise your hand? It's usually because you're afraid of what I'm going to ask next. Prove it. How would you prove you're creative? It comes down to how you define creativity. And this is something that has haunted me my entire career. I've been a creative since I was that big. Ironically, so have you. And somewhere along the line, you lost that view of yourself, that you're creative. But that doesn't mean you actually lost your creativity. You just stopped seeing it as creative. Your definition changed. I've been studying this for the last 15 years, and one of the things that I've come to is that one, our definition globally of what creativity is flawed. And two, there are two great misconceptions about what creativity is. One of those great misconceptions is actually leading you to not raise your hand right now. One of the great misconceptions I found about creativity is somewhere along the line in our lives, we attached creativity to artistry. And because we are not artistic, we say we are not creative. Because that's who we look at and say, well, that person's creative. They can paint, they can draw, they can write music, they can play. Those people are creative. I am not artistic, so therefore I am not. And it's simply a misconception. It's not true. And it comes to our definition of what creativity is. And as you start to think about it, if I ask you, well, how would you define creativity? If you had somebody asked you, what's the definition of creativity, what would you come up with? I've been asking this question for 15 years, and what's ironic is that every time I ask somebody what their definition of creativity is, they give me a different response. And it's usually something that they're not on purpose, right? And in doing so, I've really struggled. Why can't there be one definition of what creativity is so that we all understand it? And that's been my search. Can I define creativity globally? Can I do so in a way that is universally true? And I believe I have. I believe I've defined what it is. And in doing so, it has sort of altered the way we view the work that we do. Creativity at its core is simply problem solving. That's all it is. And so there are many of you right now who are like, well, that's disappointing, right? And you're disappointed because that can't be it, right? You'd be right. That's actually not it. But it's at the core of what it is. See, you as adults are serial problem solvers. You solve thousands of problems every single day. You just don't view them as problems because you've developed routine in order to solve those. You were confronted with a problem the moment you woke up this morning. You had to pee. And you're usually not in a position to solve that problem the moment it arises, are you? But you've developed a routine with which to solve that problem. You get up from your bed and you walk to the bathroom. But that's not the only way to solve the problem, is it? You could solve that problem lots of different ways. Frankly, you don't even have to get out of bed to solve that problem. But you've chosen to create a routine that has worked for you, so you don't even see it as a problem anymore. And that's the nature of how we work as adults. We work to create solutions that are routine so we no longer have to see them as problems, so we can focus on the problems that are not routine. And we do this over and over and over and over again. And then therefore we see the work that we do as not creative because we've created routine. But yet, every time a problem is presented to you, you have a choice. See, that definition is true, but it's incomplete. Creativity is problem solving, but there are two characteristics: relevance and novelty. Now it's starting to feel a little bit better, isn't it? Creativity is problem solving with relevance and novelty. Relevance means we actually have to solve the problem in order to be creative. If we solve a different problem, we are not being creative. We're being a jerk. Solve the problem you're given, right? So you have to actually solve the problem to be creative. That's relevance. That's an objective definition. We either solved it or we didn't. But we all know that creativity is subjective. Two people can solve the same problem and one solution feels better. And you know that. And you're like, this one's just feel like there's more to it. There's something great about it. That's the subjective part. That's the novelty. or the uniqueness or differentiation that solution possesses. And there's your subjective piece to it. Now creativity has a universal definition that has a consequence. And the consequence is the second great misconception about what creativity is. Not only have we attached it to artistry in our lives, but we seem to think creativity is a talent that some people have and other people do not. And if that definition is true, creativity is not a talent. It's a skill. And what's the great consequence of skill? You can get better at it. We've never really thought of creativity as something that we can get better at. It's a characteristic either we own or don't own. But what if you could? What if you could improve creatively? What if you could learn to solve problems with greater quantity and quality over the course of time, in the same way you can improve at any skill? If you wanted to learn how to get better at playing the guitar, you can watch all the YouTube videos you want, but until you pick up a guitar, you're not going to learn how to get better at it. You practice. So if you can practice solving problems with relevance and novelty, you'll improve at it. See, as adults, we're not only serial problem solvers, but we're really good at relevance. We can solve a problem and make sure it's solved, and then that's it. It's novelty where we struggle. And in our jobs, in our lives, oftentimes we want our solutions to be more novel, to be more unique, to be differentiated, and that's where we struggle. So, because we don't practice it, we're conditioned to solve problems with relevance. We're not conditioned to solve problems with novelty. So all we have to do is swap that formula. Solve problems with relevance and novelty, and we'll improve at it. All of a sudden, we're the people at parties that people want to hang out with and talk to, that are unique. We all have those people in our lives that we call quick-witted. They can come back with a response. They can come back with a joke. And you're like, I don't know, how do you come up with this stuff? It's because they do it all the time, right? They practice it. If we practice it, we can get better at it, right? So today, I am going to give you 3 ways to practice it. I'm going to give you 3 creative bootcamp commands. You guys, you're in creative bootcamp this morning. And I'm gonna give you 3 commands that are gonna help you generate ideas in greater quantity and quality over time. And I'm gonna do so by making a statement. I'm going to make a promise collectively as a group. If creativity is a skill, the other byproduct is that we should be able to measure it. Now in this room, measurement is valued, right? If this is a skill, I should be able to measure it, and I'm going to. I'm gonna make a claim. I'm going to guarantee as a group, you're going to walk out of this room more creative than you walked in, and I'll be able to prove it. So, it's a big claim. Just go with me here. This will be kind of fun, right? To do this, we're going to use creative exercises. So, if you were in my workshop yesterday, you know I love little creative exercises. You don't need to hear me speak. I love you guys practicing it, and then I can tell you what happened when you practiced it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use these little creative exercises, and you're going to be doing this with a partner. So you're not going to be doing this alone. And you're going to be doing this by writing something. So for those of you who have notebooks and pens, I would get them out because you're going to need them, at least you and a partner will. So we're going to open with a creative exercise. I'm going to get you guys woken up here so that when U2 and Rolling Stones come, you guys are all lathered up, ready to go. Okay? We're going to start with a creative exercise called Pirate Happy Meal. Now, I have to admit, obviously I am from America. Happy Meals are fairly prevalent. In your cultures, Happy Meals may not be as prevalent. So I'm hoping I'm describing them and defining them correctly. This one's called Pirate Happy Meal. Pirates sail the high seas searching for plunder, but what about all the pirate children? Don't they deserve plunder too? The best place to find the type of plunder little pirate kids would want and enjoy some tasty parrot McNuggets is in their very own Happy Meal box. But what would they find at the bottom of those boxes? Let's find out. You're going to be getting in teams of 2. You can also do it in teams of 3. Together, you are charged with writing down as many Happy Meal toys as you can think of if Happy Meals were around during the historical era of Caribbean pirates. In one collective list, write down as many as you can. I'm only going to give you 3 minutes to do it. So you guys are going to pair up, and the 2 or 3 of you are going to talk through and generate one list. If Happy Meals were around during the pirate times, what would be in those boxes as toys for pirate children? Don't start yet, you cheating bastards. Look at you. You're already starting to have conversations. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do this. You guys ready? One list together. Ready, go. All right, time. Time. All right, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to count up how many ideas you came up with and write that number at the top. Write that number at the top. Okay, count up how many ideas you came up with. Write that number at the top. All right, so why do I have you go through that exercise outside of it's just enjoyable for me to watch you go through that exercise? I have you go through it because for that 3 minutes, you just entered into the creative process. You may not have seen it that way. It was a task that was assigned to you. It was a list of words, but you had to generate ideas, and you had to generate them to a degree of relevance and novelty. What's interesting is I never defined it outside of a list of ideas, so there are certain characteristics to the problem solving that you created on your own. There were rules that you created for yourself through this, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So there's something that we can learn from the creative process you just entered into. In this instance, it was in a room full of people for 3 minutes. Oftentimes it's at work while you sit at your desk. Sometimes it's on your way into work. Sometimes it's late at night and in the middle of the night and you wake up in a sweat where you have to write down, there's the answer, I have to write it down. The thing is, our work may end at 5 or 6 o'clock, but creativity doesn't. All of us have experienced us taking our work home. What really all it is we're still thinking about problem solving. We're still solving it. And that's exactly what you guys are still doing right now. If there was a heat map, your brains would still be going because you're still thinking as you kind of go through this. But there's 3 things that we learned through the creative process that I kind of want to show to you. One of these has to do with what the excuses we give ourselves for not being able to generate more ideas. What's the number one excuse we give for not generating more ideas? I don't have time. In theory, you solved the problem the first time you wrote something down. And if you put down 3 things, I've got 3 choices. And so you go off and you make those 3 things. And then all of a sudden you look out into the world and everyone else's problems are solved in the exact same way. And you're like, how come? Well, it's because they did the same thing, right? As adults, we've solved the problem. We solve it with relevance. That's the condition we've created for ourselves. So why should we keep going? But what we've seen that it's not really about time, is it? It's about motivation. See, you kept going because you were motivated to do so. And there's all these little secret things that were happening in this exercise that motivated for you to do so. First and foremost, the problem you were solving is very different than the problems you get to solve at work. Those have, consequence attached to them. They're for other people. This was kind of fun, so you're like, oh, this is kind of fun. I can do this. It was only 3 minutes. And as an adult, we're like, I can focus for 3 minutes. He's going to call time at some point, and I can focus for that. You were sequestered. You didn't want to be the person that got up and said, this is stupid. I'm going to go get something to eat, right? You had accountability. You were partnered up with somebody. Any of you who have ever tried to lose weight or go to the gym on a regular basis know how important accountability is. You had somebody you couldn't just turn off and not do this because somebody's there going, come on, well, what do you got? I've got 4 things written down here, right? So you can see all the things that are motivating us to solve this problem. The great thing about motivation is that we can turn it on and off anytime we want. We can choose to be motivated at any problem we want to be motivated for. We can choose to generate ideas with greater novelty and anytime we want. That's the beauty of it. There's a switch for motivation. So that's the first thing we learn. It's not about time, it's about motivation. The second thing has to do with the creative process itself. So look at your lists, okay? Throw out loud the first 2 or 3 items on your list. Just throw them out. Fish. Hooks, a parrot, because I said parrot McNuggets. Yeah, you start to see these. These should sound familiar because they're probably on your list too. Now look at the last 2 items on your list. Why are you laughing? Throw out some of these. What, a water gun, a gold tooth. You're starting to get the idea here, right? We seem to think of creativity as a moment, right? There's this picture that it's a flash of lightning when brilliance hits in this moment. Creativity isn't a moment. It's a process. And this crowd should understand the value of process. And if you want more novelty in your ideas, you have to let the process play out. The ideas that you generate, there is a system that happens. The low-hanging fruit comes out first. The easy stuff comes out first. And then starts coming the novelty, and you're going to see that here in a second. So as creativity is a process, it has to play out. When we struggle with the novelty of our ideas, we have to let the process play out. The third thing we learn is about the shape of ideation. And I'm going to graph this for you here in a second. How many of you know the author Kurt Vonnegut? American author, Fahrenheit 451, a couple of other things. Kurt Vonnegut believes that all stories can be graphed. So if you were in my story workshop yesterday, a lot of those structures, like boy meets girl, and if you remember, like bad gets worse, those are all Kurt Vonnegut structures. He believes all stories can be graphed. And so he would say, all I need to graph something are basically two indices, right? So he would say, I'm going to have a main character, a protagonist, and I'm going to have the happiness of my main character as one indices. And then all stories happen over the course of time. So now I have something that I can graph. And he would say, he's named one of his story structures boy meets girl. And the idea of boy meets girl is that a boy's going along in his life and everything's fine. He meets a girl, everything's fantastic. He screws things up, everything's terrible. He gets redemption and everything's great again. Which, by the way, is the shape of every romantic comedy you've ever watched. Anything Jennifer Lawrence, J-Lo, has ever done goes whoop right into that. Right there. What's ironic is that the creative process, because I just watched it happen over 3 minutes, I can graph your creative process. And it has a really similar shape. I'm going to show you what that looks like here. I think we're going to video this. Are we going to video this? I have no idea if we're going to video this. Well, I'm going to do this. Here we go. To have any graph, I just need two indices. I'm going to call this vertical Q, the quantity or quality of ideas you generate. And then I'm going to call this one time, just like Kurt Vonnegut would. All ideation happens over time. You guys did it in 3 minutes. Sometimes it happens over a half hour on your way into work, whatever it is. I presented you with a problem. This whole first paragraph is not a problem. That's just me being funny. As soon as you were presented as a problem, as an adult, you start solving it in your head because you have to. That's what adults do. Whenever we're confronted with a problem, we have to at least solve it once so that we have the feeling that, okay, this is something solvable. When we don't have any answers to a problem, it really bothers us. We usually move on because we can't stand it, right? So as soon as you were presented with a problem, you started generating ideas. So did your partner. So when I say go, you both have 2, 3, 4 ideas to share with each other. The energy is really high. You guys are generating ideas. You're hearing your partner's ideas, starting to build off your partner's ideas, right? But then, as you guys go through the ideas that you've already generated, the energy starts to go down. I don't know if you felt it in the room when I said go. There was high energy. About a minute and a half in, there's low energy. But something turned this around, because at the end of this, you guys had high energy, right? So you start to bottom out, but something turns it around, and you have a bump before this bottoms out. Now, that bottoming out happens either organically or mechanically. Organically is you really are out of ideas. Let's go get a beer. I've got nothing else, right? Mechanically is me calling time. And in this instance, if I don't call time, you keep going, right? So what's interesting about this, there's a couple things we learn about that. That's the shape of ideation, no matter if it happens over 3 minutes or 2 hours. It happens the exact same way every single time. Why is that important? Any behavior we can assign a pattern to, we can improve because we know where the marks are, right? In my entire life, as I've been going through this, I've felt this pattern, even as I've begun to measure it, and I've been fascinated by what happens right there. What turned you around? It's usually when someone says something stupid. So, that's the problem that I gave you. You assigned certain characteristics to that problem. It had rules. I never said they had rules. You created rules because you're an adult, and that's what adults do. One of the rules you created was it has to be around during the time of pirates. Very few of your lists say cell phone because it wasn't around during the time of pirates. I didn't tell you to do that. You just naturally did that. You read it into the rules. That's what adults do. Right? One of the other rules that you created was that it most likely has to be appropriate for children. It's a Happy Meal for kids. So you started there, but that's not where you ended. And that's where stupid comes in. Somewhere on your list, someone broke one of those unwritten rules. And as soon as they did, it gave you permission to play in a space you didn't have before. Look at your list. About halfway down is a really bad idea. It's a really dumb idea. It's a stupid idea. About halfway down, someone said rum. Somebody put a sword or a gun in the Happy Meal box, right? One of you broke the unwritten rule, and as soon as you did, you gave your partner permission. Well, if that's what we're going to do, boom, 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 scurvy, boom, 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 boom. You know, like you just started going on, right? It's usually when someone said something stupid. And what's interesting about this process, right? We know as adults we're conditioned to generate ideas with relevance, and we struggle with novelty. Generally speaking, I'm not saying it works this way every time, but generally speaking, these ideas have a tendency to be more relevant. Those ideas have a tendency to be more novel. So if we as adults struggle with novelty, which we do because we're not conditioned to do so, we know that the first ideas we generate to solve a problem are going to have the highest degree of relevance and the lowest degree of novelty because that's how adults work. And then stupid happens, and then novelty occurs. And all of a sudden we recognize that that pattern, that shape of ideation, we can actually use to our benefit. If we're struggling to generate ideas, get to stupid faster. The faster you get to stupid, the more you get to interesting. Now, you're going to ask yourself, what good are novel ideas if they're not relevant, right? But here's the key. You can pull back ideas that are novel into relevance, but it's really hard to push relevant ideas forward. And that's usually what we do as adults. We start with an existing format, an existing model, and we try to push it forward and make it cool, just add something new to it. But it's so much easier starting with something novel and pulling back, and I'll give you an example. One of the exercises I give when I do this, especially in America, is I call it Wild Westios. It's basically the Happy Meal during Wild West times. And I had two people in the front, and I could hear their conversations. There was two young ladies that were having a conversation, and they went through this part right here, where they're down here. Sally Hogshead, who's a creative coach, she calls this the throne of agony. This is the point we get to in a lot of our projects where we go, I have no ideas. I'm not good enough. I'm gonna look into how much a barista gets on a regular basis. Like, we start to question ourselves, right? That's the throne of agony. So they're having this conversation. They're talking about their box. They get to this point of silence. One of them says, jail. The other one goes, well, a jail can't fit in the box. And you're like, did you need to tell her that? Like, I'm not sure if you needed to tell her that. But then she said, well, what if we made a jail out of the box? Like, folded the box into a jail. And then all of a sudden, all these ideas started to come because they hadn't thought about the box as an opportunity. What they did is they started with novel and pulled back into relevance. Because if this is where we struggle, we need more data at this point to find those nuggets that we can pull back into relevance. So if we know this is the model and we know it plays out over time, let's just continue to build the model. Start with stupid faster. Get to absurd quicker. And we'll find more novel ideas to be able to pull them back into relevance. Make sense? All right. Our 3 creative bootcamp commands. I want to get to these. The first one is to get stupid. And I keep using the word stupid. I don't mean it in a negative way. It's really the concept of absurdity, right? That what we know is killing us creatively because we keep using our knowledge in replacement of curiosity. And in doing so, we assume that the problems we're solving have never changed, but they have changed. We just don't want to admit they have because we solved them already. And there's nothing worse than a solution that's irrelevant to an adult. And in doing so, that means we've got to go through the whole process over again. But I'm telling you, go through the whole process all over again. You have to start from scratch every single time. Does it get exhausting? Sure. But that's where innovation comes from. We use this term innovation a lot. You hear it in the industry a bunch, right? Most companies are actually not willing to do what it takes to be truly innovative, which is to throw out everything they've been successful at and start again. It's just there's too much risk, there's too much cost. So they need us, the creative generation, to challenge them and to be fairly bold about it. To go, you think the problem hasn't changed, but it has. You think the way that we're building this hasn't changed, but it has. And the ones that we look at, the models that we use on a regular basis, those models, they may still be relevant, but if they're not changing and adapting to how we are on a literally daily basis, then they're irrelevant. And it requires us to go, I fell in love with the process, not the outcome. So we're going to use the process over and over and over again. That's something I've learned in this industry. If you fall in love with the process and not the outcome, you'll be happy the rest of your life. If you fall in love with the outcome, you're going to be disappointed because you don't control it. So in this way, if we fall in love with that process and we use this process and we do it over and over and again, then starting from scratch should be the best thing we get the opportunity to do, not the worst. So as we start to do this, understand, get stupid, pretend you don't know anything, and start again. From a research standpoint, this is fundamental to the way that you guys have to work. You have to, you know nothing. Start from scratch. What do I know? How do I build it? right? And challenge yourself as we move through. The second creative bootcamp command, there's an exercise attached to it. So we're going to do this little exercise, okay? You're going to get with a partner. This exercise is called the middle. Story is a powerful communication vehicle because it's universally understood. The flow of story is known so well that you can often predict the outcome of a story before it's revealed. But what happens when that story isn't linear and you're left with the task of filling in the missing pieces? Let's find out. You're going to get with your partner. Together you are tasked with writing a story from the middle. I'm going to give you the beginning and the end. The two of you have only 3 sentences with which to connect the beginning of the story with the end. So I'm going to give you the beginning of a story, the end of the story. You have to figure out what happens in the middle, you and your partner, okay? Here's the story. A man woke up in the center median of a busy highway, unable to remember how he got there. He was holding an authentic 18th century Spanish sword in one hand and an empty bottle of peppermint schnapps in the other. And then your 3 sentences, and then dazed, he picked up the chicken, apologized to the young woman, and rode away. You have got 3 minutes. You and your partner write 3 sentences. Ready, go. All right, time. How many of you were actually able to write 3 sentences? You got like two sentences, right? You got like 2 of them, and you're like, I'm not sure how this is going to work. I want you to understand what you had to just try to overcome, right? Look at all the things you had to overcome. A man, amnesia, a highway for some reason, right? The sword, the empty bottle of schnapps. It might be different if it was a full bottle of schnapps, right? Something he would be dazed about, something he has to pick up, or the chicken he has to pick up, something he has to apologize for, something he's writing away on, 3 sentences, and just for fun, I cut it to 2 minutes. Look at all that you had to overcome, and you almost did it, right? And add to that, you guys wanted it to be creative. So you could have solved it super fast in a really relevant way, because you could use time travel like that, and then you're done, right? But some of you were like, no, I want this to be good. Middle of an exercise. UX Lisbon, why does it need to be good? But you wanted it to be good. That's your own internal desire. That's the integrity you as creatives have, right? You wanted it to be good. Look at all the restrictions that existed within that. And for those of you who solved it and wanted to solve it in a creative way, that's the point, right? That's our second creative bootcamp command, is to want the box. We seem to think freedom is what leads us to creativity, and it doesn't. Restriction does. The more restrictive the environment, the more creative the opportunity. I gave you an impossible problem to solve, and you guys almost solved it. If I gave you 1 more minute, I guarantee you half this room has their hands up. Like, look how close you were. An impossible problem, and you were going to solve it. The problems you guys face are impossible problems. I'm telling you right now, Mina's a very good friend of mine. I've seen the problems that she's solving. You're like, how are you possibly solving it? It's impossible. But that's what makes us creative. We should want the box. Everyone says to think outside the box. No, no, no. Think inside the box. Use the box as the driver for creativity. It's the restrictions that make us creative. When we have too much freedom, we can't be creative. Every one of us have suffered from the blank white page. It's like, I need the dot. Give me something to start with. You need a restriction. And when there aren't enough restrictions, you should be adding restrictions, even if it's for your own creative process. To say, I'm going to do this at this budget, or I'm going to do this with this restriction. The greatest restriction you can give yourself is time. If you guys have 2 weeks to start a project that you know is going to take you 1 day, when do you start the project? The night before, right? It's because time is one of those elements with which we think we need more of. What would happen if you started earlier and then you iterated? You would solve the problem over and over and over again, and all of a sudden you've got a list of pirate Happy Meal toys with which you can then pull from something lower on the list, something that's got a little bit more novelty attached to it, instead of having to pick one of those 3 first ideas and moving forward with it. Time is one of those restrictions that you can give yourself anytime you want in the context of the process that you have. So we have to want the box. The last Creative Bootcamp command is to can the critic. There is a little voice inside your head that says, don't say that thing out loud because they'll think you're stupid, right? We don't share our ideas because we don't think they're any good. Or more importantly, probably more accurately, we don't know if they're any good. And there's a risk to sharing a bad idea. But bad ideas are the fertilizer for great ideas. And if you don't share them, no one else can build on them. How many times have you been in a session with which someone threw out a bad idea and you went, I don't know what you were thinking when you said that, but what that got me thinking about was this. And all of a sudden you're like, holy crap, that's fantastic. They built from your idea, but if you never share it, they can't build from it. Ideation, while we make it a solo thing, it's actually a very corporate exercise. It's something that improves in a group, as long as the group has the same freedoms. Say whatever, share whatever. This is free, this is open, this is safe. Let's just move forward. The greatest ideation sessions are the ones that feel like someone rolled up a newspaper and whacked you with it, and you're walking out of the room like, I have no idea what just happened in there. There's all kinds of ideas up on the board. I can't even remember any of them, right? You go back in a day later. How many times have you had a board full of stickies, you go back in a day later and go, I don't remember half these. Where'd these come from? Those are the types of sessions that feel like you've just embedded yourself in the creative process and you don't even remember how it happened. That's how it should feel as you go through the creative process. That free, that open, that safe, so you can build on the ideas that other people offer you. All right, last exercise. Here we go. Medieval Happy Meal. Why am I so focused on McDonald's? I have no idea. The Happy Meal. A miniaturized meal for children is accompanied by a cheap, useless toy. What could be better? How about Happy Meals during other times in history? Your last Creative Bootcamp exercise will invite you, once again, to imagine for yourselves. Get with the same partner you had when you solved the Pirate Happy Meal exercise. Together, you're going to write down as many toys as you can conjure up for the Happy Meal of a slightly older era, medieval times. I'm talking knights, horses, castles, the whole 9 yards, and I'm even going to give you 3 minutes to do it. You guys should feel familiar with this exercise. You and your partner are going to write one list together. If Happy Meals were around during medieval times, what could, would, or should have been in those boxes as prizes? 3 minutes. Ready, go. stupid. Time! All right, write up the number of ideas you generated and write it at the top. Write up the number of ideas. I want you, after you write up the number of ideas you came up with, I want you to put your two lists together, Pirate Happy Meal and Medieval Happy Meal. I'm going to ask you two questions. One of them is going to be quantity, one of them is going to be quality. We're going to start with quality. What I'm basically going to ask you is which list is better. So I want you to look at your two lists, and I want you to evaluate the quality of the creative on those lists. And here's what I want you to do. By raising your hand, how many of you would say that the Medieval Happy Meal list is a more creative list for you than the Pirate Happy Meal? Okay? It's about half. How many of you generated more ideas this time than first? That's almost everybody. Congratulations, you are more creative than you walked in. Thank you guys for giving me some of your time. We're going to bring out the heavy hitters.